sky, hello blue. There's nothing can hold me when I hold you. It feels so right, it can't be wrong. Rocking and rolling all week long. Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. Saturday, what a day. Moving all week with you. These days are all free. These days are all free. These happy days are yours and mine. These happy days are yours and mine. Happy days.
My next guest is a director, a musician, an actor. He is bravely fighting through a cold right now, and I'm happy he's on the show. When I say the words legend, iconic, and nostalgia, you certainly will think of him. He is actor Don Most. Don, how you feeling today? A little bit better? I know you had to sing last night.
Yeah. I'm doing a little better, thanks. It was a little tough. Fighting some nasty bug, and of course it settled right down in my throat and chest area when I had to sing. But somehow I got through it with the help of a hot toddy or two, and that helped. That did the trick, and it went really well. And things are going well in general. You just got to get past this little bug. That's all.
Don, the best Bobby Darin song of all time has to be Beyond the Sea, right?
Well, I don't know that that's the best Bobby Darin song. No. I would take. We differ on that one. I like Beyond the Sea. Always liked it, but no. I mean, I grew up to Bobby's Mac the Knife. That is the best. I mean, and I do Mac the Knife in my show because I've been doing it since I was pretty young. Singing along to Bobby in my parents' living room. Listening to that 45 over, and I wore out the grooves on that. And and I actually was singing before I was acting. I was doing it in clubs up in the Catskill Mountains, upstate New York, when I was 15. And so I always loved that kind of music. And Bobby, man, he was my man. I saw him at the Copacabana in New York when I was 18, twice that year. And never forget that. And so I pay a lot of tribute to Bobby when I do my shows. So I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, no, and I know your fondness for him. And I have to say, there are actors who consider themselves singers, and I put quotations on that. I've heard you sing on multiple occasions. I YouTube. I try to see what you're all about. You have a phenomenal voice. You are like a legitimate singer, and I say that with all truth being told, not just because I'm speaking with you. You have a fantastic voice.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, people that don't know me, they know me from more than not from Happy Days and from other things, and they don't know this part of me, and I think when people hear, oh, I'm doing this, the immediate reaction is kind of like what you alluded to, is that, oh, well, it's kind of a novelty, or it's sort of a vanity thing. He's trying to do this, because for whatever reason. But no, that wasn't the case. That was my first love, and my idols were Sinatra and Darin and Sammy Davis Jr. and Nat King Cole and some of the great jazz singers, female and male, and Ella Fitzgerald and Dinah Washington. I love that music, and I'm bringing it. I mean, I'm not the only one who's doing it. Obviously, one of the reasons I decided to do it again about 5 years ago, I said I'm putting together a show. If I'm ever going to do it, this is the time, because this music has had quite a resurgence in the last 10, 20 years, and with some great artists like Diana Krall and of course Michael Bublé doing it, but Harry Connick and Tony Bennett with Lady Gaga, and on and on. So I knew this was a time, because this is my bread and butter. And for a while, in the 70s and 80s when I was on the show, it was hard for me to do that kind of music because it was not really in favor. It was looked on as sort of passé back in the '70s especially, and even in early '80s. So it was hard to do it then. So I'm so happy that I'm getting a chance to do it now, and I have a CD out called Mostly Swinging, with an incredible assortment of some of the top jazz studio musicians in L.A., and it swings. It really swings. And so if people into that kind of music, and even if you're not, when I do my shows, and a lot of times there's some young people that are there, whether it be with their parents or friends, and they love it. They come up to me after and they go, "My gosh." They maybe have never been exposed to it in the right way, and they go, "This is freaking great. I love this music." And, it's like a discovery. And so I love seeing that. This music transcends all demographics and age ranges. It's just such infectious, joyous. And when it's done right, and I'm a stickler for having the arrangements just a certain way, and getting great musicians, and then it's just a major high for me. So you should check out my CD, and I recently put up a video, or it's going up in the next couple of days. It's a promo from a show I just did down in Orlando with the Orlando Jazz Orchestra, a 17-piece band and great band, and I put up check it out. It's called Donny Most at Full Sail, FULLSAIL. That was the venue in Orlando that we did it at. And you get a little taste of what I'm doing in the most recently, and with the kind of setting I love with the big band, So, that's great. And but, I'm not... it's by no means putting aside the acting or directing. I'm still doing that. I, as a matter of fact, just did a couple of independent films too in the last 2 months that I'm really excited about. So things are, they're humming, which I love. I want to keep busy and keep doing this as long as I can.
Yeah, keeping busy hasn't been a problem for you, especially of late. You mentioned your singing, and I can't get over how really great you are. Not that I was expecting otherwise, but I didn't think I was expecting. Paul Newman was a race car driver, more for a novelty thing, right? You're a legitimate singer, and you mentioned the directing and acting. You were in Glee, a funny little part in Family Guy, Star Trek Voyager, great book. I mean, you're always working, which is great. You're born in Brooklyn. You're an engineering guy, then you change to business, and then Don, you make this big decision your junior year to say, right, you know what, I want to go for some acting jobs. I wanted to ask you a question though. What was one, your parents' reaction when you made this choice, and two, what was the reaction when you really, on your third edition, hit a grand slam?
Oh yeah, great question. Well, initially, I told my parents and everyone that I was going out after just my junior year at Lehigh University, that I was just going to spend the summer out in California because, I'd been pursuing acting and singing in New York since I was about 13, and then I got, as I mentioned, lucky to be part of this nightclub act when I was 15. But then I switched gears and I put my focus on acting, and it wasn't interfering with school, so my parents were fine. I was doing a lot of commercials that I would audition for, and even in college I was coming in, commuting for these auditions, and if I got one, so I missed a day of school, it wasn't a problem. And I was doing theater in college, but so when I said I'm just going to go out for the summer, so that after graduating I would, maybe get some contacts set up and my networking in place, so that I could pursue it in a bigger way after school. So that was no problem, obviously. So, but then when I got out there, I was lucky. I was able to get an agent because some of the work I'd done in New York, and then they sent me out on auditions while I was out there, and I landed a couple of guest starring roles pretty quickly. And So then what happened was, after the summer, and I was set to go back to school for my senior year, my manager talked to me and said, I just had a long talk with your agents out there, and they think, you've got some momentum going and the season's getting hot. You should really think about staying and, take 6 months off from school. You can go back, but you got some mojo going, And, I didn't even have to think at that point. It was like just animal instinct. Yes, that's what I'm doing. Now, I knew that was going to be a difficult discussion with my parents, but I was saying, hey, look, it's just 6 months. Let me just ride it out. And luckily I had been doing pretty well with the commercials and a few other things, so that I built up the resources where I could finance doing this, getting flying back out, getting an apartment and all that. So, they weren't real thrilled, but it wasn't, it wasn't a major stumbling block. And so I did it. And then, and then it was funny. Then I went I got a part right away, but then I went 3 months, I think, without anything, and I was going, oh no, this was a bad idea. I made a mistake, and I was really starting to freak out. But I figured, all right, well, I'll go back to school soon. But then a couple of auditions came up, and one of them was Happy Days, and then I got called back for another one, and then I got called back again for a screen test, and I was up for this other movie at the same time, a TV movie. And then, I got offered a role on Happy Days. So yeah, I mean, obviously my parents were pretty, excited, but also at the same time, a healthy dollop of cautious skepticism of, well, what does that mean? Is it you're doing a pilot, and it doesn't mean that it's going to go on the air, which we knew. And so there's still a long way to go before you knew that, hey, you've made this huge, you've gotten a huge break. It was still, the jury was still out on that,
Right.
At the beginning.
Yeah, and I can't even imagine walking in your shoes and having people tell you how much you mean to them, how much they loved Happy Days. And this is I was trying to think of a way to ask you this question without having it sound negative. Do you ever want to say to somebody, hey, I do other things, I'm a really accomplished person. And I love Happy Days, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that before I let you go. But is there ever a part of you, Don, that says, you know what? I'm this really talented guy that's done a lot of things, and you're not an arrogant man, so I didn't know how to phrase that question, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Oh, well, definitely, and I appreciate the sensitivity that you're projecting towards that. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I felt that way years ago. I think when I was trying to, as a young man, I'd done the show for 7 seasons, and I knew I was getting associated with this role, and the early roles that I got were more in the dramatic vein, and that's what I was really, frankly, more interested in at the beginning. Always was dramatic stuff, but then when I got Happy Days, I was associated with comedy, and then it became I couldn't even get auditions for the kinds of roles that before I was getting. Like I had done a police story where I played a psycho bomber, and then a show Emergency where I played a guy who became paralyzed, and so and then when the comedy came along, it was like, yeah, well, I could do comedy if the material's good and all that. That's as an actor. I just approach it as an actor. I was not a comedian. I would never do stand-up comedy. I couldn't. I would just approach the material, and whether it's drama or comedy, it doesn't matter to me. So it was very frustrating after when I made a decision after my contract was up to leave the show. It was a difficult decision, and there are a lot of reasons. And maybe the next time we do an interview, we can go into it more, because it would take some time.
Right.
But I made a decision to, after 7 years playing the one character, I wanted to move on. And yes, then at that time it was like, I wanted people to know that, hey, this isn't me. That's a character I played, and it's not even really like who I was in person, you know. And it was difficult because I couldn't even get in the room for auditions for the kinds of roles I wanted. It was yes, I definitely felt that way then. Not so much now because, you know, it was tough, but I kept, you know, pushing and forging ahead, and I didn't get as many of the roles I wanted to at first, and the kinds of roles, but you know, I would do certain things and more theater, and then some TV, and then some films, independent films, and now with the singing, and then I directed 3 independent films, which was a fantastic experience, and you know, and now, I guess as I'm getting older and there's more distance, time, and just separation from that role, from that show, and I'm in a different age category, and so now some of those roles, the really interesting roles that I've always wanted, have been coming now. And these last 2 films I just did, one called MBF, Man's Best Friend, where I play a defense attorney defending a wounded vet. And it's a heavy, really, really powerful project and a great part. And I was so happy to do that and excited about it. And then I just did a film where I played one of the I don't know if you're familiar with the whole FLDS, the polygamous sect, and Warren Jeffs, who's in jail. It's that whole story, and I play one of the bad guys and one of the polygamists. So, you know, it's like, yes, these are the kinds of the diversity and the wide variety of kind of roles that I've always wanted to do, and it seems like they're coming now. And so I'm very thankful and excited about that. And hopefully I've got some great projects that I want to do again on my own in terms of, you know, getting behind the camera to direct again. And so I'm shopping those right now. And so we'll see. But an answer, my long-winded answer to your question is, yes, I did feel exactly what you had asked about. But now I think it's starting to come out, you know, and people are realizing it, and I still have a long way to go in my mind, but I see it opening up. I see it breaking, you know, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's really well said, you know, and I think when people say that to you, I think they're coming from a very honest place. You're a big part of the grain of their lives. I mean, my goodness, you know, and I told you off air how much you and I looked alike when I was younger. Yeah. If we traded the red and blonde hair, we'd be identical twins. You know, I remember I used to hit radios all the time trying to get them to turn on. So I'm part of that love for Happy Days, but I'm also a part of the love of what you're doing now. So you loved being on that set. I've heard you say that. You know, you were on the show for 7 years. It runs for 11. I know you said in other places how therapeutic theater was for you, and you're right. It's a long story, and I don't want you to go into it now because, you know, I don't want to. It gives me an excuse to bring you back one more time. So yeah. So it's time to move on in your eyes. You say after 7 years, I don't want to get typecast. You know, I don't want to be in the same kind of thing my entire life. Right. So my question is a couple things here. Do you regret leaving early? Do you feel like, maybe I should have stayed longer? And boy, did you have a tough time kind of, and I think you've said this before, it's exactly what you thought was going to happen, and it happened, right? Yeah. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I don't think, I don't regret that I didn't stay longer. I think the one thing I would have done differently, because I just, and when I get back on your show, and I could talk about it at more length, but you know, creatively, I needed to move on. I felt the quality of the scripts wasn't the same as it had been. Yeah, after 7 years, and it was starting to, I thought, go downhill, and that was a big reason. And there's a bunch of others which we'll get into next time. But also, you know, sort of for my soul, I felt like, you know, I couldn't just play the same character, and knowing that I was feel like I was digging the hole deeper and deeper the longer I stayed. Now the reality is, I remember our great director Jerry Paris saying to me, "Well, the damage is already done. Like, you know, you haven't, yes, the typecasting thing you're going to be facing, staying longer is not going to make it worse. It's already, you're already there. And maybe he was right about that. But what I did do that I kind of regret, and what made it harder for me, is that back then, and this was 1980, 81, it was very difficult to go from television to movies back then. It's very different now. Now, if you're in a hit show, you do films, and people who are in films do TV now. It's like a bridge back and forth that didn't exist back then. It was, you were either in films or you were TV. It was a real separation. But yet, I'm 27 and I was a little stubborn, I guess. I told my agents after I left the show, I didn't want to do television for a while. I didn't want to do another series. I just wanted to try to do films and theater and stay away from TV, because at that time they weren't doing the high quality dramas like they are now, and I definitely wanted not to do another sitcom at that point. So I probably made it as tough as I possibly could on myself, because I said I turned my back on television, and I said I just want to do film and theater, and it was virtually almost impossible to do that. When you look back at people coming from a sitcom successfully moving into films back then, there's 2 or 3 people. It was like Sally Field did it, and Travolta did it then, and then a little bit later Tom Hanks. But so many. It was very, very difficult. So the one thing I would have done differently is not that I left the show too early, but I had offers at that time for other for pilots for other series, and I didn't even want to consider them. So that I might have, maybe I regret turning my back on television, and that, because then maybe it would have been easier to make the transition in a sort of gradual, step-by-step phase,
Sure, and there's nothing wrong. I mean, my goodness, no matter what you do for a living, you should be at the point where, you know what, I feel a little bit complacent kind of here. I want to challenge myself. I want new things. That's a healthy mindset. I mean, just even right now, Don, hearing you talk about your music or other projects you have, I can hear the pride in your voice, and that's the sign of a very talented person who's always pushing themselves to another level, to achieve other things. I think that's a healthy mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I really do. I mean, I do feel this strong desire to keep getting better and to keep pushing, as you said, pushing yourself and stretching and going one step beyond what you've done, and I'm driven in that way. So I guess that's part of why it was difficult, because I made things difficult for myself and not going the easy route, I guess. And but it's a marathon, not a sprint. And luckily, it's a profession where, it's not like a professional athlete where, well, it was over when you're 30, 35, luckily, I can still do this for a while and have some time left.
Yes, good. And before I let you go, I kind of want to run some names by you and just kind of talk about what comes to your head when I mention these names. Ron Howard.
Wow. Well, one of the greatest guys and amazing talent. And the funny thing you mentioned is that you were called by my character name. The funny thing was, when I was young, I looked just like Ron did when he was on Andy Griffith. So people used to call me Opie. So I mean, I got that all the time. So you can imagine how surreal that was for me when I got to all of a sudden found myself working with Ron. But he was a great friend and an amazing man and a wonderful, wonderful talent. Very
cool how you were in the Star Trek universe and he's in the Star Wars universe. Very cool how that worked out. Henry Winkler. Incredibly inventive, incredibly smart and compassionate man. What I saw, what he did in the creation of that character on Happy Days, and to see it evolve and see how he
made it happen was a thing to behold. It really was.
I got two more for you. How about Tom Bosley?
Oh, I just miss him very much. He was kind of like a bit of a father figure to us, and set a great tone for us, and professionalism and humor and warmth. Really miss him.
Yeah, and people forget how young you were when you went over to the West Coast. I mean, and he kind of embraced you like you said, like a father would. Yeah,
he was very much like that to us. He would give us advice about all the things in life, that we were going through, because we were like a family, and so they were privy and aware of what we were doing, and it was great, and because I didn't know anybody on the West Coast when I went out there. I didn't have family and friends out there, so they became my family, and Tom definitely was like a father figure, as was our director, Jerry Paris.
And finally, your good friend on and off screen, Potsy Anson Williams.
Yeah, Anson and I are probably better friends and tighter now than we ever were, than we were back then. I'm never cease to be amazed by Anson, by his drive, his energy, his smarts, and his talent, and we have a great friendship, and just love the guy.
And people don't realize how many stars were on. I mean, maybe they do, but Tom Hanks, Robin Williams, Lauren Green, Hank Aaron. The one cast member I did want to ask you about before I forgot, Pat, the unbelievably talented and kind Pat Morita.
Yeah, Pat. Yeah, another man that I miss so much. He was exactly that. So kind, and just sensitive and so funny, and talented. We used to go. I miss. There were. I have such great memories of when we would do a show in front of an audience on Friday nights. So after our dress rehearsal, which was during late in the afternoon, there would be a dinner break, and we could either go to the commissary where they'd serve dinner, or there was this really nice restaurant right outside the gate of Paramount Studios called Nickadel's, and you could go there sometimes. So there were times where Pat would say to me, "Hey," Pat would say, "Hey, you want to go out and have dinner," and that kind of thing, and so I have great memories of going with Pat, just he and I, and having dinner and maybe a drink or two, and I got to see this whole other side of him. But yeah, he was a really kind man, and it's so sad. It's so sad that he went very prematurely, and wish he was still with us.
Yeah, well said on all of the above. And one of the things that people associate Happy Days with, as they should, is laughter and kindness and all these wonderful things. But you obviously remember the Styx episode. I mean, that was ahead of its time, I think. That's a tough issue. And I was watching that just to kind of get, just remind myself. And boy, you could play that episode in 2018; it would be just as effective.
It held up, huh? I haven't seen that episode in a long time, but that's good to know that it really held up. But you're right; they were sort of, ahead of their time in some ways, dealing with some of the issues that were a little tricky, because here we were in the 70s dealing with what was going on in the 50s, and there was a new awareness, a different sort of mindset about, let's say, the racial kind of thing like that, dealing with Afro-American in this white community and all that. And in the 50s, it was dealt very differently than was when we were making it. So, it was good that they would take on things like that, and they did it in a thoughtful way, but where the humor, though, could take away the onus of it from being too preachy, I suppose, and being too heavy. So it was a nice way of balancing it, and so that's great to hear that it holds up today.
Don, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show. I'm holding you to it. You better come back, because I got to ask you about your Yankees Dodgers thing. I'm not understanding that. We got to talk about that, and your love of golf. And I want to tell my listeners that you definitely still got it, Don. I cannot thank you enough. His name is Don Most. Don, thank you for coming on the show today.
Derek, I appreciate you having me, and I definitely will come back so we can go to the next chapter of some of those stories, okay?
Yeah. Thank you, Don.
Anyway, this was a song that won the Grammy for Record of the Year in 1959, and I will be snapping my fingers to this as long as I'm singing.
Oh, the shark, babe, has such teeth, dear, and he shows them pearly white. Just a jackknife has old Mag Heath, babe, and he keeps it out of sight. You know when that shark bites with his teeth, babe, scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves, though, as old Mag Heath, babe, so there's never a trace of red. Let's let the band go now. Now to hear about Louis Miller. He disappeared, babe, after drawing out all of his hard-earned cash. And now Mac Heath spends just like a sailor. Could it be our boy's done something rash? Jenny died off. Oh, yeah, Sugar Tawdry. Ooh, it's a lot in ya. And Lucy Brown. Oh, the line forms on the right, babe. Now that Mackie's back in town. I said, Jenny Diver. Whoa, Suki Tawdry. Look out to Miss Lottalinia. Oh, and Lucy Brown. Yes, that